Van Hale arrived on the starship Aurelian Grace without fanfare, without loud steps, and without the confidence most soldiers tried to show. He looked like someone still learning where to stand and how to salute. His uniform was too new, his boots too clean, and his trainee patch almost shining. Many of the crew barely looked at him. Those who did only nodded politely or gave him a short smile before returning to their own duties. In a ship full of experienced fighters, he seemed like the quietest shadow. Princess Lyra noticed him, but only in the same way she noticed new servants or visiting scholars. She acknowledged his presence, but nothing more. She did not know his story, and she did not ask. To her, Evan was simply one more trainee assigned to her protection detail because the Empire insisted she should have extra guards during her tours of the wild sector. She assumed he would stay in the back, follow basic orders, and learn from those older than him. But Evan was always there, always close enough to protect, always far enough to not disturb her. If she walked down a corridor, he was 2 steps behind. If she paused to greet citizens, he took silent note of the surroundings. If she entered the ship's gardens to get a moment of peace, he stood in the doorway like a still statue. She never felt his presence, but he never left her unguarded. Still, she never questioned this behavior. In her eyes, he was simply doing as he had been trained. What she did not see was the depth behind his quiet eyes. He carried something old in his gaze, something many humans carried, but few expressed, a kind of calm strength that didn't need to be announced. It was the strength of someone who had survived storms that left no scars on the skin, but many on the soul. He never bragged, never tried to prove anything. He simply existed with a gentle steadiness that most people overlooked. During briefings, Evan always stood at the edge of the room. He listened carefully, even when others whispered jokes about how serious he looked or how little he spoke. He never reacted to teasing, never frowned, never complained. Some mistook his silence for weakness. Others thought he lacked confidence. Princess Lyra assumed he was shy, nothing more. She did not know that humans from his region were differently trained to remain calm even in danger. Trained to observe before acting. Lyra herself was young but carried the weight of leadership on her shoulders. Her people expected grace, intelligence, and strength from her. But even she could not hide her exhaustion sometimes. When she practiced diplomatic speeches, she often stumbled on difficult lines. When she read reports, she sometimes sighed without realizing someone might be watching. And Evan always noticed. He never interrupted, never offered advice, never tried to be more than his position allowed. But he watched her with respect, like someone who understood how heavy responsibility could feel. One quiet evening, as the ship drifted through a peaceful star lane, Lyra stood alone near a transparent wall of glass, watching glowing dust trails pass by. Evan stood behind her, silent as always. The stars reflected softly against the floor, painting her in tiny specks of light. She looked lonely, though she would never say it. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. "You're Evan, right? The new trainee?" He nodded once. "Yes, Princess." "That's good," she said kindly, though there was little emotion in her tone. "Just follow the team. No pressure." Evan smiled a small, humble smile that faded quickly. "Of course, Princess." She turned back to the stars, unaware of the thoughts running quietly in Evan's mind. He had been placed in this role for a reason. Command trusted him more than he trusted himself. Yet he would have traded all recognition for the simple comfort of being ordinary again. But ordinary was not his life anymore. Not after the things he had seen. Not after the truths he carried. For now, he remained the silent trainee. Invisible, overlooked, underestimated. And Princess Lyra, despite her sharp mind and royal upbringing, still had no idea who truly walked behind her or what the universe itself remembered about humans like him. The journey to the wild sector began long before the Aurelian Grace reached. The edge of the uncharted green world. The princess had prepared for weeks, studying maps, culture reports, and weather patterns. She stood with confidence as she reviewed her notes. Her guards whispered with excitement, some nervous, some proud. The mission felt important. The wild sector was known for ancient forests, rare species, and territories where humans and royal travelers rarely walked. But no one showed fear, except maybe the trainees. Evan stayed behind the group, quietly adjusting the straps of his gear. He listened to every sound in the command room, every breath, every shifting footstep. While others talked about scenery and exploration, he listened for things that did not belong: changes in tone, signs of hesitation, shadows of concern. It was second nature to him. He didn't know how not to be alert. Princess Lyra noticed none of this. She only saw the excitement of a new world. For her, the wild sector was a place where she could do something meaningful for her people: study peaceful tribes, strengthen alliances, and bring new understanding. She felt proud, hopeful, and slightly impatient to land. She wanted to prove she was more than a royal title. When the ship began descending, she stood near the front window, watching the giant green forests stretch endlessly beneath them. Sunlight glittered on rivers that cut across the land like silver threads. Mist curled above the treetops, glowing softly. It looked calm, almost magical. Her guards murmured with awe. Even Evan lifted his eyes toward the view, his expression unreadable but thoughtful. Something about the land felt alive and watchful. Lyra turned to her team. Everyone ready? There were nods, laughs, quick checks of equipment. Evan simply said, "Ready," his voice steady and calm. Soon the ship landed on a quiet clearing. The air smelled fresh, like wet leaves and wild flowers. Lyra took her first step onto the soil with a smile. Her boots sank lightly into the soft ground. She breathed deeply, feeling free. The guards spread out, scanning the surroundings. Birds with glowing wings floated above trees. Strange vines twisted gently around massive roots. Every sound felt peaceful, gentle, almost welcoming. Lyra whispered, "It's beautiful." Evan nodded, watching the tree line more closely than the sky. The forest was calm, but too calm. There was no wind, yet the leaves barely moved. The birds sang, but stopped suddenly whenever he looked in their direction. It was as if the forest was aware of their presence. Still, he kept silent. He did not want to worry the princess. As they began walking, Lyra led with energy. She asked questions about plants, pointed out glowing mushrooms, and chatted with the guards. She seemed lighter here, as if the forest removed her royal burdens. Evan followed behind her, his senses sharp. Every sound felt magnified. Every shadow seemed too still. He watched the canopy, the ground, the trees, noting places where something large might move. The guards laughed at some joke he didn't hear. He kept scanning. A young guard walked beside him. "Relax, trainee. This place is peaceful." Evan gave a small smile. "Peaceful places can hide things too." The guard laughed. "You humans worry too much." Evan didn't reply. He just continued observing. He felt something old stirring in the trees, something that knew they were there. After a while, the path grew narrow. Leaves brushed against Lyra's arms. She turned back for a moment to make sure her team followed. Her eyes stopped on Evan. For the first time, she truly noticed his seriousness. "You okay back there?" she asked gently. "Yes, princess," he replied. "Just watching the forest." She smiled lightly. "You don't need to be so tense. This sector is peaceful now." The report said the hazardous creatures moved deeper inside. Evan didn't argue. He simply nodded, but inside he felt a quiet warning. The forest was too silent in places, too alert in others. Something was watching. Something patient, something ancient enough to make even humans cautious. But the team kept walking forward, and the wild sector watched them with eyes they still could not see. As the team moved deeper into the wild sector, the air grew heavier. The light filtering through the thick canopy became dim, turning green to gold and shadow. Every step made a soft crunch on the fallen leaves, but something felt wrong. The birds no longer sang. The wind no longer whispered. Even the insects, usually buzzing endlessly, were silent. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Princess Lyra noticed the sudden quiet, and her chest tightened. She glanced around at the guards. Most of them stiffened, their hands resting on their weapons instinctively. The air felt different, heavier than before, almost alive. She could feel eyes on them, though no creature was visible. Something in the forest was waiting. Evan walked behind her, calm as always, but his senses were alert. Every sound, every subtle movement, every shift in the shadows went straight to his mind. Unlike the others, he did not freeze or show worry. Instead, he analyzed, calculated, and prepared. To him, the silence was a warning, not a threat. The princess whispered, "Evan, do you feel that?" He glanced at her briefly, his expression soft but serious. "Yes, princess. Pay attention to the tree line, to everything that does not belong. The forest is aware of us." Lyra blinked. She had never noticed how he observed before. Not really. His eyes didn't just see. They remembered. They weighed every detail, every movement. And at that moment, she realized she had never truly looked at him, not the way she looked at her. Egards, or the way she looked at the land. A rustle came from the side. Small branches snapped under invisible weight. A shadow moved between the trees. The guards tensed, hands gripping weapons, ready for any attack. Lyra's heart began to race. Evan stepped slightly forward, not to confront, not to fight, but to read the forest. He lowered his voice just enough for her to hear. "They are not here to strike yet. They are testing us. The creatures are aware, but patient." Lyra swallowed hard. "Testing us?" she repeated. He nodded. "The wild sector has always been home to predators unlike any others. They judge intruders. They are the apex of their world. But they respect calm, respect awareness, and they know fear." The princess felt a shiver. She had faced diplomats, navigated political intrigue, and survived dangers on many worlds, but this was different. Something ancient and powerful waited for them in the shadows, and she could not see it. She realized that no training or knowledge could have prepared her for this moment. Another rustle came, this time closer. A massive branch shifted as if something large moved through the undergrowth. The guards murmured, whispering warnings, voices tight with tension. Lyra felt fear for the first time in the wild sector, not for herself, but for her team. Yet Evan remained calm. His eyes swept the shadows with quiet confidence, not arrogance, not pride, just presence. He did not flinch. He did not whisper in panic. He simply knew. The forest, the predators, even the invisible tension, they recognized him in ways Lyra could not understand. The moment stretched. Time slowed. The air felt thick, almost tangible, pressing on them like water. Lyra wanted to speak, to reassure herself, but words caught in her throat. She looked at Evan again and felt something new, curiosity mixed with awe. This quiet human, whom she had assumed was only a trainee, moved through danger without fear. He observed without panic, prepared without pressure, and waited without arrogance. The shadows seemed to shift in response, the forest alive but restrained. The presence that had seemed so heavy and threatening felt hesitant. The creatures were waiting for something. And somehow, without movement, without noise, Evan was communicating with them, not with words, but with the way he stood, breathed, and moved. Lyra felt her heart pound, her respect for him growing faster than fear. She realized she had judged him too soon, assumed him weak because he was quiet. But now, in the stillness of the forest, she understood that strength could be silent, power could be calm, and courage could shine without noise. The forest waited, and Evan Hawley waited with it. And Princess Lyra, for the first time, saw a human not as ordinary, not as a trainee, but as something the universe itself seemed to notice. As the team moved deeper into the wild sector, the air grew heavier. The light filtering through the thick canopy became dim, turning green to gold and shadow. Every step made a soft crunch on the fallen leaves, but something felt wrong. The birds no longer sang. The wind no longer whispered. Even the insects, usually buzzing endlessly, were silent. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Princess Lyra noticed the sudden quiet, and her chest tightened. She glanced around at the guards. Most of them stiffened, their hands resting on their weapons instinctively. The air felt different, heavier than before, almost alive. She could feel eyes on them, though no creature was visible. Something in the forest was waiting. Evan walked behind her, calm as always, but his senses were alert. Every sound, every subtle movement, every shift in the shadows went straight to his mind. Unlike the others, he did not freeze or show worry. Instead, he analyzed, calculated, and prepared. To him, the silence was a warning, not a threat. The princess whispered, "Evan, do you feel that?" He glanced at her briefly, his expression soft but serious. "Yes, princess. Pay attention to the tree line, to everything that does not belong. The forest is aware of us." Lyra blinked. She had never noticed how he observed before. Not really. His eyes didn't just see. They remembered. They weighed every detail, every movement. And at that moment, she realized she had never truly looked at him, not the way she looked at her guards, or the way she looked at the land. A rustle came from the side. Small branches snapped under invisible weight. A shadow moved between the trees. The guards tensed, hands gripping weapons, ready for any attack. Lyra's heart began to race. Evan stepped slightly forward, not to confront, not to fight, but to read the forest. He lowered his voice just enough for her to hear. "They are not here to strike yet. They are testing us. The creatures are aware, but patient." Lyra swallowed hard. "Testing us?" she repeated. He nodded. "The wild sector has always been home to predators unlike any others. They judge intruders. They are the apex of their world. But they respect calm, respect awareness, and they know fear." The princess felt a shiver. She had faced diplomats, navigated political intrigue, and survived dangers on many worlds, but this was different. Something ancient and powerful waited for them in the shadows, and she could not see it. She realized that no training or knowledge could have prepared her for this moment. Another rustle came, this time closer. A massive branch shifted as if something large moved through the undergrowth. The guards murmured, whispering warnings, voices tight with tension. Lyra felt fear for the first time in the wild sector, not for herself, but for her team. Yet Evan remained calm. His eyes swept the shadows with quiet confidence, not arrogance, not pride, just presence. He did not flinch. He did not whisper in panic. He simply knew. The forest, the predators, even the invisible tension, they recognized him in ways Lyra could not understand. The moment stretched. Time slowed. The air felt thick, almost tangible, pressing on them like water. Lyra wanted to speak, to reassure herself, but words caught in her throat. She looked at Evan again and felt something new, curiosity mixed with awe. This quiet human, whom she had assumed was only a trainee, moved through danger without fear. He observed without panic, prepared without pressure, and waited without arrogance. The shadows seemed to shift in response, the forest alive but restrained. The presence that had seemed so heavy and threatening felt hesitant. The creatures were waiting for something. And somehow, without movement, without noise, Evan was communicating with them, not with words, but with the way he stood, breathed, and moved. Lyra felt her heart pound, her respect for him growing faster than fear. She realized she had judged him too soon, assumed him weak because he was quiet. But now, in the stillness of the forest, she understood that strength could be silent, power could be calm, and courage could shine without noise. The forest waited, and Evan Hawley waited with it. And Princess Lyra, for the first time, saw a human not as ordinary, not as a trainee, but as something the universe itself seemed to notice. After the apex retreated into the mist, the forest seemed to exhale. Leaves rustled gently. Birds cautiously sang again. Even the sunlight returned, piercing through the canopy in golden beams. But the sense of awe, the weight of what had just happened, remained heavy on the group. The guards whispered among themselves, exchanging astonished glances. Some could barely believe what they had seen. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Princess Lyra stood frozen for a moment, staring at Evan. Her heart still raced. She had thought him a quiet, unremarkable trainee, someone she barely noticed, someone she assumed existed only to learn. But now, in the face of the most feared creatures of the wild sector, he had not just survived. He had commanded respect. Without a weapon. Without a word. Without even a show of force. "Evan," she said softly, her voice trembling. She could barely believe it herself. How did you do that?" Evan turned to her, calm, gentle, and almost embarrassed by the attention. His eyes held no pride, only quiet honesty. "Princess, it's not about power. It's about understanding. The apex aren't mindless predators. They feel fear, awareness, respect. They respond to calm. They respond to someone who knows their world, even without threatening it." The guards looked at him as if he had spoken in a language they could not comprehend. Lyra took a step closer. "But you're just a trainee. You're human. How could you?" Her words faltered. She had spent her whole life studying strategy, diplomacy, and leadership. She had read about legends, about heroes who conquered beasts with strength and courage. And yet here stood Evan, a young human, and the legends had bowed to him. He gave a small, humble smile. "Princess, humans have faced threats like these before. We survived things the galaxy would call impossible. We learned to stay calm, to observe, to respect forces greater than ourselves. I've only carried that knowledge with me." Lyra felt a rush of emotions, guilt for underestimating him, awe for his courage, admiration for his wisdom, and something tender that she could not name. She had assumed she knew him. She had assumed he was harmless. She had been wrong. "Evan," she said again, softer this time. I judged you. I thought you were just learning, that you weren't capable." Her eyes searched his face, seeking the truth. "I never saw." "I understand," he said quietly. "Many do. It's natural to underestimate what you do not expect. But I didn't want to frighten you or the team. I only wanted to protect you, Princess." Her chest swelled. The words were simple, but they carried weight. He had faced creatures that no one dared confront, and yet he worried more about her safety than his own recognition. She realized then that strength was not measured by how loudly one could strike or how boldly one could fight. True strength, the kind that even the apex recognized, was calm, selfless, and steady. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the forest around them alive and breathing. She looked at Evan, really looked at him for the first time. His quiet presence was not weakness. It was power she could not have imagined. Power born from patience, courage, and understanding. "You saved us," she said softly, voice thick with emotion. "And you didn't even make a sound. You didn't need to." Evan's eyes softened, and he looked away for a moment. "It's not about being seen, Princess. It's about doing what's right." For the first time, Lyra felt a deep humility. She had learned much about the galaxy, about politics, about alliances. But she had never fully understood the quiet, unassuming bravery that humans could carry. She realized that the trainee she had dismissed, the human she had assumed was ordinary, had changed her view of the universe forever. Not because he was loud or proud or powerful in the ways she expected, but because he had shown her that true heroism was quiet, selfless, and wise. And in that moment, Princess Lyra understood something important. Humans like Evan were not ordinary. They were extraordinary. Not because they demanded recognition, but because they inspired respect, even from beings the galaxy feared most. She looked at him, emotion flowing freely now. I want to understand humans," she whispered. "I want to understand you." Evan met her gaze, calm, steady, gentle. "I would like that, Princess," he said softly. And for the first time, Lyra no longer saw Evan Hale as just a trainee. He was a hero she had overlooked, a quiet force the galaxy itself seemed to recognize, and a human who had taught her the meaning of courage. The forest seemed calmer after the apex encounter, yet the air still carried a quiet tension, as if the wild sector itself was aware of what had happened. Princess Lyra walked beside Evan Hale, trying to process the events. Her chest still felt tight from fear, awe, and something else she couldn't name. She had always believed she understood strength and bravery, but Evan had shown her a kind of courage that was quiet, patient, and powerful in a way she had never imagined. The guards had resumed their positions, but they no longer whispered or exchanged nervous glances. They had seen it too, the apex stepping back, the forest acknowledging Evan in a way no one had thought possible. Their respect for him had grown silently, and Lyra noticed it. Even the youngest trainees looked at him differently, their previous teasing replaced with quiet admiration. "Evan," Lyra began, her voice soft, I think I was wrong about you. I assumed you were just learning. I thought you were here to observe, not to protect, but you did more than any of us could." Evan glanced at her, his expression gentle. "Princess, I only did what anyone who values life would do. I just stayed calm. I observed. I made sure the people I was responsible for were safe. That's all." She shook her head, a small, amazed smile spreading across her face. "No, it's not just that. The apex, they didn't just step back. They respected you. They listened to you without a word, and you didn't even seem to notice their power or fear it." He smiled softly. "I noticed, Princess. But fear never helps. Respect helps. Understanding helps. That's what they respond to. That's how humans survive when facing dangers greater than themselves." She studied him, finally seeing every detail she had overlooked before, the calm in his movements, the quiet confidence in his eyes, the way he seemed completely aware of everything around him without appearing tense. She realized that strength wasn't always shown through loud words, swift actions, or shining medals. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was unseen. Sometimes it was simply choosing to stay calm when everything around you trembled. For the first time, Lyra felt humility. She had been taught to lead with authority, to project confidence, to command attention. And yet here she was, learning something she could never have learned from books or lectures: human courage. She had always assumed humans were fragile, unpredictable, or unremarkable. But Evan had shown her the opposite. She took a slow breath and said, "I want to understand. Not just humans in general, but you. How you think. How you stay. So steady." Evan turned to her fully, his gaze softening. "Princess, it is easier than it seems. Calm your mind. Observe. Listen. Respect life, even when it's bigger, stronger, or stranger than you. That's all it takes. The rest comes naturally." She nodded, though the simplicity of his words hid a depth she could only feel. She felt warmth spread through her chest. For so long, she had felt pressure, expectation, and responsibility crushing her. Now beside Evan, she felt a quiet strength she could lean on. Not as a shield in battle, but as inspiration in life. The sun broke through the canopy, painting the forest floor with gold light. Evan walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, but in a steady rhythm that felt reassuring. Lyra realized she had been walking through the wild sector with a human. She had underestimated someone whose courage and wisdom were greater than her own assumptions. "You've taught me something," she said softly. "Something I never thought I would learn from a trainee. Humans are remarkable." Evan smiled, a small, humble curve of his lips. "Not remarkable because we fight the strongest. Remarkable because we understand what matters most. We protect, we endure, we observe, and we act when necessary. That is all." Lyra looked at him, truly looked at him now. The quiet human she had ignored, overlooked, and underestimated had become the measure of bravery in her eyes. She felt respect, gratitude, and a growing sense of connection, a bond that words could not fully capture. For the first time, she understood that true strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it walked silently beside you, calm, unwavering, and ready to guide without demanding. Attention. Evan Hale was that strength, and Princess Lyra knew her life and her understanding of humans would never be the same again. Mission in the wild sector was ending, but the echoes of what had happened lingered. The forest seemed less intimidating now. Yet Princess Lyra could not shake the memory of the glowing eyes, the massive forms of the apex, and the way they had retreated before Evan Hale. Every time she thought of it, her chest swelled with awe and gratitude. As the team prepared to board the Aurelian Grace, Lyra walked beside Evan once more. Her steps were slow, thoughtful. She wanted to savor the moment, to understand it, to appreciate the human who had saved not only her life, but the dignity and safety of her entire group. "Evan," she said softly, "you didn't just protect us. You changed everything I thought I knew about courage, about humans, about strength." Evan's expression remained calm, but his eyes held a softness she had never seen before. "Princess, I only did what anyone who cared would do. I acted because it was right, not because I wanted recognition." She smiled, a mixture of relief and admiration. "That's what makes it so remarkable. You didn't need to show anyone. And yet, the apex respected you. That is something no one else could have done." For a moment, silence fell between them. The guards moved ahead, preparing the ship, unaware of the quiet exchange. The sunlight filtered through the trees one last time, painting golden streaks on the forest floor. It felt peaceful, almost sacred. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the experience and the significance of Evan's presence. "I assumed you were just a trainee," she admitted. "I underestimated you, and I feel ashamed I didn't see your strength before." Evan shook his head gently. "There is no shame in assumptions, Princess. Many do not understand humans at first. What matters is that we act rightly when it is needed. That is all." Lyra's heart swelled. She realized that heroism did not need to be loud or showy. It could be quiet, steady, humble, and still change the course of events. Evan had done just that. And in doing so, he had taught her something she would never forget. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to learn from you. Not just how to survive, but how to see courage, patience, and strength in ways I never understood." Evan turned to her, a small, genuine smile forming. "I would like that, Princess. Humans may be quiet, but we endure. We observe. We act with care. You already see it now." For the first time, Lyra felt the full weight of respect, not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as someone who had truly witnessed another being's power. Evan did not need medals, titles, or praise. The apex themselves had acknowledged him. And that acknowledgement, silent and profound, was more than any human achievement. They walked together toward the ship. Lyra felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the protection he had offered, but for the lesson he had given. It was a lesson in humility, patience, and the quiet courage that changes worlds without anyone noticing. As the ship lifted off, leaving the wild sector behind, Lyra stood beside Evan at the observation deck. The forest receded beneath them, the mist curling over the trees like a soft curtain. She looked at him, really looked at him, and understood that some heroes did not seek attention, did not demand glory. They simply chose to act when it mattered most. "Evan," she said softly, "I will never underestimate humans again. And I will never underestimate you." He looked at her, eyes calm and steady. "Thank you, Princess. That is all I ever hoped for." The stars stretched endlessly ahead, quiet witnesses to their journey. Lyra realized that humans, in all their ordinary seeming, carried a